So you have different kind of languages trying to reach out and make some kind of action now. It's very urgent. And our chance is our kind of subject, which is happens to be, well, some people ask, is it art? Is it anthropology? Is it landscape? What on earth are you on about? But whatever it is that we call it, our adventure club, it's our mission to try to get people to change behavior and see the world differently. So if we then team up with people who have the facts, but they can't reach out, then we can try to communicate and be some kind of disseminator and join forces. And then we can make use of science and art and whatever we need.
Hey folks, welcome to the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast. We're now into our second episode of Season 2, exploring our relationship with nature and the more than human world through the medium of the arts. Our guest for this episode is the Norwegian-Finnish duo behind the project Eyes as Big as Plates. If you haven't seen their work before, Karoline and Riitta collaborate with a person and really a place to create a compelling image. The human. They started out focusing on elders, but now engage people who have something to say about the climate crisis or are actively engaged in it in some way, is fitted with a wearable sculpture featuring organic materials such as sticks or shells or fungi that match the setting, so the composition integrates a person into a place they have a connection to. They've created more than 150 of these images and released 2 books of these images since the project started in 2011. There's a great video that takes you behind the scenes of creating an image that is linked in the show notes and on the Substack post for this episode. In the episode, we talk about how the project Eyes as Big as Plates was initially influenced by Nordic folklore, how the duo worked with serendipity as a project manager, how the word nature in and of itself can create artificial separations, and a new school program the duo is working on with students in Eastern Finland to create their own Eyes as Big as Plates style images and display them alongside the duo's work. I'm a really big fan of Karoline and Riitta's work, and their curiosity about people and the more than human world really radiates in our conversation. They consider the project an adventure club now, combining landscape work, sculpture, photography, storytelling, and anthropology. It was a real treat to get to chat with them, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. On the Eyes as Big as Plates website, you can see a lot more of their work, and most importantly, you can actually buy your own copy of their book, Eyes as Big as Plates 2, with the proceeds going to create book number 3, which is currently underway, and which will feature images with mycologists, biologists, soil scientists, and even an opera singer. As you'll hear in the episode, seeing the final image is great, but getting to read the story that goes along with each piece adds new layers and depth to each image. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm going to start using this intro and the Ecosystem Member Substack to share interesting happenings in the art world where the arts meet nature and the more than human world. If you happen to be in Southern California right now, one not to miss is PST Art. It's happening at more than 70 institutions with more than 800 artists, all under the theme Art and Science Collide. Exhibitions include work from Gustav Metzger at Hauser and Wirth in downtown LA, a show titled Breathe, Toward Climate and Social Justice at the Hammer Museum, and a work highlighting my favorite tree, the Joshua Tree, at the Lancaster Museum of Art and History. But if seeing art is not enough, there are actually a lot of interactive events you can join as part of PST. One that caught my eye is with the artist Anna Wingfield at the Benton Museum of Art at Pomona College. Wingfield creates these amazing ink-wiped monotypes using copper plates that explore the sense of place and passage of time. Key to her practice is understanding that sense of place. So she'll be leading a workshop on December 5th, helping attendees learn how to create a sense map. Visit pomona.edu/museum for more details on how to join that workshop. So with all that out of the way, please enjoy this episode of Ecosystem Member with Karoline and Riitta, creators of Eyes as Big as Plates. Today on the Ecosystem Member podcast, we are excited to welcome the duo behind the project Eyes as Big as Plates. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent to be here.
So just so folks can connect a voice with a name, I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves as part of this creative and artistic duo.
So my name is Riitta Ikonen. I am a visual artist from Finland, currently in New York.
And I'm Karoline and Riitta from Norway, currently in Norway. Wish I would rather be with you guys.
Awesome. So we're really excited to have you. I think I mentioned the email to you. The first time I actually came in contact with your work was at the Barbican's Our Time on Earth exhibit. And I've just really enjoyed sort of unpacking and exploring all of the work that you've brought. And we'll definitely have in the show notes links and through the video some examples of that. But maybe we can sort of start at the beginning. What questions were each of you sort of exploring or asking yourself? Like, what sparked your curiosity to sort of pursue this project?
Nice
Very
question.
Nice. It was a long time ago. Was it
Yeah,
13, nearly 14 years ago?
I think so. Well, we want to start, Rita?
Let's do it. We were basically looking at people in the north and folk tales and how many inexplicable wild natural phenomena were explained through human form. And we thought, wow, this is so fun and curious. And I heard that Norwegians were doing this a lot. And back in Finland, we didn't have any of it. It was just really, rock was a rock and that was it. And then, so we wrote this project where the plan was to go and talk with the older people in the community and ask them like, okay, well, do you have any relationship with the river back there? And could you tell us more about it? And very quickly, like often you have an idea and people kind of put you in your place like, that was a nice idea, but it's rubbish. So people in a small town of Sandnes in Norway basically told us that our thinking was completely BS and we were on the wrong track and we should recalculate. And yeah, Karoline.
Yes, so recalculating, but at the same time, they would still, like some of the questions would be, okay, did your grandparents kind of talk to the rocks or did they do something special? Like my grandma would never throw hot water on the ground because they are living below the ground. So we would upset them. And they could still, like some of them would maybe talk about how their previous generations could talk to nature. But as soon as we moved a little across the border to Iceland, for example, they are still very much talking to nature and building houses around, and roads would be built around big rocks because there were already somebody living there. So we were put in our place, but it depended on where we were, I think.
Very much. So really there was this, so we were kind of focused on nature in bunny ears and older people because we foolishly thought they would know. Turned out they were very busy with their Zumba classes and coding workshops that they were not really bothered what was underneath that rock. And so yeah, then we really have more or less ever since been on this quest of like, okay, so we live in a world, but we don't really think about it, question it, pay too much attention to it necessarily. Like maybe it's not worthy of that much attention because we can truck along as we are, or can we? So that's really been ever. So we really started as a little residency, and then it sort of snowballed from there after we got the call from the Finnish Institute in Oslo if we wanted to do an exhibition. And we thought, okay, maybe how about we do more, one more, and yeah, here we are. We call it our adventure club now.
Amazing, and I think you have 2 books now out of a collection of the collection of these photographs. So it's the project's quite expanded, and we'll dig in a little bit more to it. So I mentioned that sort of the first time I saw your work was at this exhibit at the Barbican, and it was sort of projected in one of the atrium spaces. And I think I described it in the email to you guys. Like it almost like seeing it, it felt like a hug, because for those who haven't seen your work or maybe are just listening and haven't looked online, the elders that you collaborate with, they wear this sort of sculpture made of natural elements. So it might be leaves or branches or whatnot, I'll let you kind of explain how that works. But when you talk to these elders, you ask them these questions about their relationship with specific elements of the natural world sort of in their vicinity. Like, how do you formulate these ideas? What sort of things are you discussing with your collaborators? And like, how does it all come together to this finished image that we see in, one in an exhibition or one of these books that you've put out?
I think maybe every single meeting starts with, or if we can choose, serendipity is the project manager. So pure chance, and also kind of looking charismatic, the way we both of us happen to think a stranger on the street looks charismatic. We are lucky to have the same vision, and we would most normally go to this person and ask, hello, who are you? Do you have any plans tomorrow or today? Can we hang out? And from the chance meeting, this person really has the microphone, and our main job is to listen and to find out what this person cares about in their surroundings. So we get to know this person, and they talk about what matters to them and where they feel that they connect in whatever they call nature. And then we would go to this place and find a material that they also feel a connection to. And from the conversation, the sculpture is being made, I guess we could say Riitta as the master sculptor, but sometimes the collaborator would also help gather materials and put the sculpture together. And we would, I think we could say that the final photo is like a bonus, and then the meeting is the real deal.
So in the books you mentioned, Rick, we share a lot of the background information and the making of, and how we met and what went wrong. So I think quite often you see the finished artwork in an exhibition and that's it. But we really, really enjoy sharing the full story, like who is in the image and why and what happened. And the books are really gathering it all together.
And maybe we also have to mention the text. So every single final portrait has like a monologue or like a text piece to go with it. And then the process is another chapter in the book. So in an exhibition, you could choose to have an encounter just with the image, like you did in Barbican. In another exhibition, we would also share the texts to go. So it really, again, depends on the context.
We talked a little bit about the discussion you have with these elders and their connection. Sort of what are your aims? Like, what questions are you hoping that people who view it or read one of your books, like what questions are you asking them? What things are you asking them to think about? Or do you hope they're thinking about, maybe?
I think look at an artwork and you have questions rather than answers. That I already feel we have succeeded something, instead of like, okay, good, I get it. There's a house on a lake, boom. So I feel like, why, what, who, how? Then already, okay, good, we got your attention. Now let's learn more. Why is this grandma buried in the bog up to her nostrils? And then what happened? And what's her story? So just giving a little pause to anything seemingly extremely mundane and recognizing that your surroundings as usual or basic as they might seem to you as you walk past them on your way to wherever you're going, they might really have a lot more to offer if you just pay attention. So I think we hope that people would take note and ask questions. Maybe that's very wide and wild.
We do have some set questions for everybody, and it seems to have as many answers as the amount of people we've spoken to, and that's
true.
What's nature to you? And I think, we've had so many different replies to that, but we also seem to not nearly want to. I mean, we're curious about it, but we also have a troublesome relationship to this concept ourselves, because it's a tricky one. But every person who we meet gets to answer that question, and apart from that, I guess they have to somehow formulate how they relate to that word, nature, and their surroundings.
That's really interesting. I think it's something I've also experienced in this podcast, asking people about their relationship with nature, the more than human world. And, some folks will tell me about how they love kayaking. Other people will tell me about how, time they spent with family in nature, and like this is a gathering place, or, they have different forms of resonance. So as the artists in this case, how do you all think about that word nature? Like, what is your own connection with nature? How does that influence the work in any way, or is it something you try to keep separate so it stays focused on the subject? Like, how does that play a role in the work? Your own relationship play a role in the work?
I think we very much live it. What we've come to, what the project and the people we've met over the last 13 years have taught us is that we are nature. There is no separation. So to have even a word that would suggest that there is a line or a border or a barrier or boundary somewhere is quite misleading, sort of like really fundamentally unhelpful.
It's definitely changed us, I think, from the world has changed. We've grown 14 years older, 2 kids. There's many different ways of changing along the way, but also the people we are now meeting are, because I remember you asked us like the reason we kind of focused on elders. We have changed that kind of focus in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 or more years to concentrate more on people who have something to say about the climate crisis that we are in. And those collaborators could be scientists or activists or farmers or people who are rewilding gurus in Finland or peat bank restoration people, or it could be so many different people who then teach us our road forward, kind of, to say it like that. So it's definitely impacting us, and what they say, like Arne Johan Vetlesen, this Norwegian philosopher, he had just one anecdote from his son that used to speak with the rivers and the trees when he was 3 and 4, and then he suddenly stopped at the age of 6, I think. And then when he was 8, his dad asked him, so why did you stop talking to the trees and the rivers? Why didn't you stop greeting them? And he was like, of course, Dad. Of course I did. Everybody would think I would be like a crazy person if I greeted my tree every time I saw one. So then that was like a sign of him being successfully socialized as a human. So those stories stick with us.
And it's interesting you talk about that sort of separation, and there are sort of, I guess, these poles in our lives sometimes where, as I was sharing with some folks a piece from Cornelia Parker that she had an exhibit in London. It was called The Future, Sixes and Sevens. And without asking young, I think they were like under 8 years old, all of the children, without asking them directly about climate change, it sort of came up organically. And they had a very interesting, very different perspective of it. And then once you get to the older generations, and maybe they've acquired a little bit more wisdom, their relationship has changed, then you get a more, in some ways, a more childlike answer. Like it's more pure in a way, which is really interesting that you've now sort of expanded to work with collaborators who have something to say about the climate crisis. Like when you're coming up with a project with them, or coming up with a picture that you're going to make with them in the sculpture, like now that you've kind of expanded this role, this age range of collaborators with something to say, like how does that having something to say specifically about the climate crisis come through in the work? Like how does that change from sort of the original place that you were focusing specifically on the elders?
I think maybe if you're just looking at the images, you wouldn't be able to tell that you are looking at a soil mycoremediation expert PhD who is working on helping stop forest fires in the West Coast by introducing different species of mushrooms. So you might not be able to tell, but by reading the text, so once our 3rd book comes out in a few years, then people can read about it. And in the exhibitions, again, you'd be able to read. So once, hopefully, if your curiosity is sparked enough to find out more, then there is a lot of information back in the works.
Maybe that's a little hidden activist part, because we've now spent 14 years building this platform, and in internet you could see memes and people saying, like, people with things on their heads, and then you get all kinds of people looking at the images but not expecting maybe hardcore facts about climate change. So I think we enjoy that subtle kind of, we're gonna infiltrate the scene like that.
It's kind of interesting because you talked about how, and I think the name Eyes as Big as Plate actually comes from Nordic folklore as well. That you're sometimes engaging like climate scientists. Like, how do you see this balance, or maybe this interaction of Nordic folklore and science, and the physicality and materiality of nature? How do those things all interplay from your perspective?
So you have different kind of languages trying to reach out and make some kind of action now. It's very urgent, and our chance is our kind of subject, which happens to be, well, some people ask, is it art? Is it anthropology? Is it landscape? What on earth are you on about? But whatever it is that we call it, our adventure club, it's our mission to try to get people to change behavior and see the world differently. So if we then team up with people who have the facts, but they can't reach out, then we can try to communicate and be some kind of disseminator and join forces, and then we can make use of science and art and whatever we need.
And what we've been doing now, when we team up with scientists and people who are working with the climate crisis, we give the rights to the images for the people in the images for themselves to use in their research papers or in their publications or whatever they're working on, to help them also gain more visibility. So like Karoline said, like just combining two languages, like a visual language and then a language of like a hardcore data-backed facts.
Yeah, I really like that. I think sometimes, it's part of the idea, I think, behind what we're trying to do with season 2 of bringing in more of the arts is like, we've had scientists on before, we've had people in the business world who work on sort of technical sustainability, all these sort of things, but I think the answer probably lies in like how we can bring all of these different spaces together, because each person maybe will connect with this in a different way, and it might be eye-opening to some or reinforcing to some. Like it could be received in different ways. So like when you have the chance to talk to people who view or interact with your work, get to read the book, get to see pieces in the exhibition, like what reactions do you get from people? Like what do they tell you about the work?
Do you remember we were in Faroe Islands once? We had an exhibition, and there was a whole boatload of cruise ship passengers who maybe weren't like your obvious contemporary art enjoying crowd. And we watched them. We were nicely anonymously flies on the wall, watching people go past. And some people stopped. We saw someone crying, just stopping really and bursting into tears. Some people walked past, and I was like, okay, lunchtime. So I think it's interesting to see, just like this philosopher we spoke with in Norway, when he delivers one of his talks, there's as many responses as the people. But for us, it's fascinating to see that, we are many.
Yeah.
And I guess there's two ways to potentially look at this question. So maybe you could go either direction. Is there sort of a natural setting that you want to do, like a glacier, or is there a type of person or a specific person you have in mind that you'd like to work with and collaborate with? Like, I guess that could be, is there a desired collaborator human-wise or more than human-wise?
Always more than human-wise. I get that. Just the last bit you said just made me think about how we always say that there's no final image without the elements. Like there's the person in front of the camera, and then there's Riitta and I, and then there's the elements dictating everything, basically. So there's always the more than human element crucial for making it happen.
Angela Rawlings, who wrote for our second book, she was running this campaign in Iceland to get the glacier nominated for presidency. So I think it's not totally out of bounds if one of the protagonists of the future images would be a glacier. So, and it really, we are open to the conversation. Anything.
Yeah, I also heard that the Fungi Foundation, they had this project where they had wanted to make the creative property also.
The river in the cloud forest.
Yeah.
To recognize the river in the cloud forest as a copyright owner for this song that they created.
And not only the river, but the birds, or like basically the sound of the rainforest, also copyright holders, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I think, really collaboration all around. Like we can want to do whatever we want to do, but I think we are continuously amazed with what actually happens when we bring in other beings or other forces. And then it's like, wow, okay, we had no idea we could go here. Let's go, full tilt. So I think we have some kind of
Maybe we can
collision
mention
is welcome.
the soil
Oh, yes,
soil
yes.
project, because I mean the one very specific image we just made was with he's not a soil scientist, but the project is created by soil scientists internationally, and then we are invited to like the artistic approach to what is anthropogenic soils. So we collaborated with this Norwegian guy in north of Norway, who I think is one other of these. It's like a machine who creates compost. So he feeds in poop from cows and horses and fish, and at the other end you have compost soil. So he used to work as a farmer in all kinds of strawberry and other types of farming, and then he realized like it's so far from sustainable. I want to do something else, and then he quit all his other jobs and started doing this business. So we basically got to photograph him in a freshly semi-fermented pile of horse poop. Looking forward to showing that.
That sounds fascinating. And I wanted to ask you about something in your TED Talk, which we'll definitely include a link in the show notes, because I think it's super interesting and helps people get some additional context around the project. So there's a quote you share in there from Roy Scranton about how your project helps people see through the eyes of other species. And we're sort of talking about different collaborators that you might want to work with. And the one that comes up is the coho salmon. And I think it might have been you, Riitta, I can't quite remember. You remarked that what would it look like to look through the eyes of the coho salmon at these situations? And you talk about how that requires imagination and empathy and curiosity. So, like, of all the things you could pursue to try to create this imagination, empathy, and curiosity, what do you think about sort of Eyes as Big as Plates specifically, like how it comes together? How do you think that narrative, sculpture, photography, all these things coming together help generate that empathy, curiosity, and imagination?
How? Because it's personal. It's so easy. I think it's relatable for everybody. Anybody can do it. It's not really that mystical. I think what we've kind of taken from that is we're starting now we started last year a pilot in schools in Eastern Finland to put this methodology that we have to create empathy, curiosity, and all of that in students, and empower them to pick issues that are important, or people or topics in their localities, and create portraits themselves, and then exhibit those portraits alongside the Eyes as Big as Plates works in our exhibitions. So we are now working on a bigger project where we could have this as a curriculum, actual like elective in the schools of Finland, starting with Finland, and to see if we can actually inspire the indoor society, the younger people who we worked with quite a lot in the past. In Horten, for example, we were working with high school students.
In Norway.
And in Norway, yeah. And Karoline, she's always the one with the hard question. She was asking, what were you asking?
I can't remember now my hard questions.
You were asking like, okay, so what about nature? Do you care about nature then at all?
Yes. And the answer was like, I think my aunt sometimes, or my dad, they sometimes like to be in the garden, and
And it was something like, it would be nice if the planet wasn't completely destroyed. And we spoke with 80 people. We worked with 80 teenagers. And it was really eye-opening for us. Like, okay, this is really SOS red alert. Like, if in we were not even in a capital city or anything. We were close to a lot of non-human life too. Yeah. And it was really the absence of understanding of our surroundings was just screaming. So we
I
were
also
really...
heard that. I think that's young people, but I also think that goes for the entire population of Norwegians who sometimes think of themselves as very outdoorsy. But apparently, we spend 95% of our time indoors. Probably not only Norwegians either.
So yeah, we had basically short answer. We're focusing on the trying to involve and inspire and engage younger people to take part and tell them that their voice matters and what they think matters, and going outside and looking and paying attention matters, and that we're listening.
Awesome. It's super exciting to see sort of how the project is expanding, evolving, and I can't wait to see what comes out next. The images the pictures are always fantastic. So thank you so much, Riitta and Karoline, for joining us today. I'm really excited to share this with folks and give them a chance to sort of get a little bit more information behind what's in the books and the finished images they see in exhibitions. Thanks so much again for joining me.
Oh,
thank you so
Rick.
much.
Very fun chatting with you.